Everybody, Invisiblekatana here. Today I would like to discuss my favorite levels in video games. So this of course is going to jump all across the board, but naturally from the start here, I want to know your favorite levels in games. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter the genre or anything like that. Just what are your favorite levels in a game? What was it that made it just like a spectacular moment for you? If it's a really spoiler section, just make sure you put like the game and then spoilers. So, just in case somebody comes across it and it's like, hey, I wish that wasn't spoiled. So just to be nice to everybody, and I'm gonna do my best. To anything that I choose to pick, I'll try to do my best to avoid any story spoilers or anything like that. But I wanted to kick things off with Devil May Cry actually. And oddly enough, I was trying to figure out what video I wanted to do today, and I started thinking about crossovers. I was like, I don't really know a lot of crossovers, and for some odd reason, it dawned on me. I was like, man, Dante's been in a lot of crossovers. That's weird. So we're gonna start with Devil May Cry just for that. And one of my favorite levels when it comes to, Devil May Cry, of course, has 6 games total, because you have obviously 1 through 5, and then you got DMC Devil May Cry, which is not the game I'm talking about. I just wanted to reference there are 6 Devil May Cry games. But if we're going, favorite levels when it comes to Devil May Cry, just in general. I wanted to do 5, but I'm gonna go with 3. I'll just start with 3. Like, there's no reason not to. It's 5 is my favorite. I would say 5 is the best one. If they did a remake, oh my God, if Capcom did Devil May Cry remakes, I'd lose my effing mind. But that's a different topic as well. Devil May Cry 3, amazing game, of course. But one of my favorite levels in that game, naturally, is going to be the first fight against Virgil. It's such a cool moment in the game, and there's not much to spoil story-wise. It's just a great fight. And it's the moment where you're fighting, you have these 2 characters. They're both super cool, obviously. Dante is like the cool dude, he likes to use his guns and stuff, and then Virgil's like, the calm, stoic samurai character. And so they have their meeting. It's, if you're playing the prequel, it's like the first time they've met in a little bit. But, things are about to go down. You got this giant tower poking out of the ground. Things are a little crazy. And you have this amazing moment where these 2 characters are just fighting. And it's like, just every part of it is super cool, because it's not just fighting in the actual level. The cutscene is amazing. Like, I wish if they did remake the game, they could almost remake the cutscene into a playable moment. Maybe they would have to do some really crazy stuff and make it kind of like a QTE segment where you like button mash, which I still think button mash, maybe I should do that for an episode. I still think QTEs have a place in gaming. Very rare, but I do believe that they still have a place. And there's some of those moments, I think Bayonetta is like the perfect example of that. But there are some moments where it's like, let me button mash this moment and let me be the one to like swing the sword so fast that we're like, the cutscene is so cool that they start fighting so fast that they're swinging their swords at each other that they're literally stopping the rain from dropping onto them. And then when they stop, all the rain just hits their bodies. That is such a cool moment as just from an action perspective. I just think of that all the time. And then Virgil is so effing cool because obviously it's raining, and that's like the one time on Earth in all these effing games where they actually look like twins, because his hair is down like Dante's, and then he just boom, he slicks it back, and it's just boom, he got the little banana peel off the front like Dragon Ball, and it's like, man, he's so cool. He's so cool. He's so cool. I love that game, but I love that level as well. And of course, there's many other levels, and naturally, every fight against Virgil is absolutely amazing. But I do want to shout out one of the best parts of the game that typically would not be considered a good part. It's only good if you know like this really random secret and you can make it like a super fun moment in the game. But it's towards the end of the game where, honestly, it's the usual thing that a lot of video games do, which kind of sucks, but it's the boss rush thing. And so you have to go through and beat a certain amount of bosses. I don't know what the deal is with Devil May Cry doing that, because they did it in 3, and then they were like, hey, you know how we did that in 3? What if we did it again in 4 but made it worse? So I don't know what their deal is with that. I hate that they do that all the effing time, but anyway, they have that at the end of 3, and you go through and you have to beat like a certain amount of bosses or like make a ringer. It's something like that, but you have to beat a certain amount, so you choose. The only reason that segment is fun is because one day, I figured out this very odd fact. This probably had to do with something, classic old school tips and tricks guide or whatever, but it wasn't a cheat code, but it was a tip. And it turns out in Devil May Cry 3, and I'm sure there are tons of people that might hear this that won't know it, in Devil May Cry 3, if you use the doppelganger ability, you can play multiplayer. You can plug in a second controller and someone can play as your doppelganger, your Dante doppelganger. They'll play as that version of the character, and they can do everything you can do. The only thing is that if they're playing, the camera obviously focuses on you as the main character, so they have to like pay attention and like stay in camera, and if they go too far off, you have to like deactivate the power and then reactivate it. But if you're doing that, and well, I guess I did use some cheat codes, because I'm pretty sure I did it with like unlimited energy or whatever, and so that allowed you to just stay in doppelganger mode. So it was basically just going through as a 2-player experience. So that is why that is one of my favorite moments, because it's just like a boss rush area, and you just pick these locations, and it's kind of, the camera tends to be fairly stationary, so you're not moving around a ton during these fights, and you can just fight a bunch of stuff. And that's the only reason that sticks out to me so well, because you can set it up as a 2-player sort of moment, and it's super fun. And I always love that, because I was like, that's an insane little thing that they have in the game that, you know, they don't, I mean, obviously they don't say like, hey, you can do 2 players if you do this, but it's super cool. So I always love that, and that's why, even though that is a boss rush area that is not necessarily entertaining or fun in the normal sense, it's super fun if you kind of cheat and it's like, hey, what if we did like a secret multiplayer thing? And that's why I love that moment. So it's a favorite for me just from a alternate perspective. I'm sure most people are like, boss rush, garbage, it sucks. But when you have the doppelganger on and you do 2 players, it's pretty fun. So that always holds a special place in my heart. And of course, I love the boss battle that actually comes after that, because you team up with Virgil. It's a little weird to control, because it takes away some of your moves to control Virgil, so it's a little weird, but it's still fun. And it's like you get to team up with Virgil, and then they do like what I consider the most famous jackpot moment, even though 5 definitely has a really good one at the end. That's definitely like the #1 jackpot moment of like every time that it's said throughout the franchise. So that is definitely, like I said, it's an odd favorite because of a very random secret thing that you can actually do if you happen to know about it. But otherwise, yeah, it's a boss rush area that is not, it's a boss rush. That's all. It's like saying it's an escort mission. You kind of don't have to say it's bad. That's fairly redundant. It's a boss rush area. But you can do 2 players, for anyone that didn't know that. So if you happen to have it on Switch or something, which is even better, because you can actually like do the trickster, or not the trickster, but you can change it like DMC 4 and 5 just on the D-pad. I think you get more capabilities, because I think the person is set to whatever you have. So, you know, normally in that, actually, I have no idea how that works. Now that I just thought about that, I don't know how Doppelganger works in terms of switching the like trickster style and all that stuff. I don't know how that plays out in the Wii version or the Switch version of Devil May Cry. So actually, you have to test that for yourself. I just thought of that. I was like, oh yeah, you can't switch abilities, but the Doppelganger counts as one of your abilities. So I don't know how the style thing works if you choose Doppelganger. So maybe you still get stuck with whatever weapon, but it's a cool idea. So definitely check it out. If you've never knew that before, just do that. Just have fun with that. Just hop on Doppelganger and you can do Devil May Cry 3, like the whole game. At this point, if you've beaten it enough times, you can just do the whole game Doppelganger and just play with a friend. You know, they won't look as cool because they'll just be a black shadow, but it's a fun experience. So highly recommend that, but that's why that's one of my favorite moments in that game, personally speaking. But I definitely like that, and obviously there's some others. I don't know if you guys heard the horn. This dude was going super slow and just like not coming over. So then when I finally get to the end of the lane, then they want to honk at me when I decide to go past them. But that's how people do it. That's how people drive sometimes. Anyway, Devil May Cry 3, definitely great. I'll skip to something else, but I do have to say, Devil May Cry 5 is so effing fun. The area where you first get Dante back is so effing fun, especially when you unlock the Sin Devil trigger. That's absolutely amazing. All of that, like just unlocking this new insane ability, it's just fun. But just playing as him in general, like when you finally get to actually play as Dante, it's super fun. Aside from the fact that there's an amazing sequence where he does the Michael Jackson, you know, he does a full dance and they do just a ridiculous sequence that I could not believe was an actual scene in the game. But it was amazing. But action-wise, phenomenal. Like getting Dante and unlocking the new updated version of Cerberus is amazing. I love that. That and the motorcycle, like getting both of those are like just two of the best moments in that whole game. Like it already seemed like, oh, this will be cool. You get a motorcycle. No, it's different. It's totally different. Like it was way beyond what I thought it was going to be, and that's one of my favorite weapons in the game. It's also one of the easiest weapons, and you just feel super cool because it's like you do so much damage and people can't really touch you. But it also looks ridiculous and fun. Like it's a motorcycle that you ride and then split in half into like 2 spinning saw blades. That's insane. And then Cerberus comes out and they're like, yep, we brought back Cerberus. Probably my favorite weapon in DMC3 if we're being completely honest. It's an ice 3-handle nunchaku, and then they're like, well, what if we just made it a staff too? A 3-section staff that does both. And I was like, oh my God, it has ice, it has fire, and you can make it lightning. So they were like, yeah, we're not gonna bring back, Nevin? We're not gonna actually bring the guitar back, but we'll throw it in for you guys. That's basically what they did, because it was purple lightning. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was, at least in some way, shape, or form, a reference to it. And it's like, that's awesome. That's just super cool. So, love me some Devil May Cry. I would love some remakes. I know they're doing Resident Evil, favorite franchise, had to throw it in there. But if they wanted to just throw out a DMC remake, especially if it was DMC3, I don't know how they would do the first game unless they just made it into a full-on action game, because that's more, obviously, for anyone that doesn't know this, because there's always someone that doesn't know, Devil May Cry was made from Resident Evil, because they were making a Resident Evil game and it was too much action in it, and then they're like, but we still think we can do something with this, and then that's how we got Devil May Cry, just in case anyone didn't actually know that. But yeah, so Resident Evil is responsible for Devil May Cry and a bunch of other things. Here's a real crazy one. Resident Evil is responsible for Red Dead Redemption, and I'll just let you look that up, but that's an interesting story. I didn't know that till very recently, but Resident Evil is technically responsible for Red Dead Redemption. So look into that, because that's a crazy story. But to jump to another game that I love and I think has just like a really cool level to it, I actually want to go with Spiderman. Even though they're missions, missions level, so, once again, heck, if you want to throw in fighting games, feel free to do that as well. Just like, oh man, you fight this specific person or whatever during this mission, you can throw that in too, because I know games obviously have gotten, a lot more intense with that, where, games are more story-based, you can go Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Tekken, the big 3, honestly. And you can just be like, hey, I like this specific level or moment of fighting this certain character or something. So definitely let me know. Fighting games totally apply story-wise. But going with Spider-Man, I almost lost my train of thought of what game I was even talking about. But with Spider-Man, specifically, I want to go Spider-Man Miles Morales. Even though this was the moment that was technically like the first time we saw the game, the mission where Miles has to like help the people on the bridge is actually a super cool mission. Once again, Spider-Man does a lot of QTE stuff as well. Still works in those games. I still think it applies in a really cool way. But I love that mission. Like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And they always give us like the shortened version when we get like our first reveals of games. But actually playing through that segment, and this bridge is falling apart and you have to save all these people. And of course, this, and I also say this, visually the game just looked really, really good. And so it was another thing about it was like, these games look so great. And that was like the PS4 version. I don't think I even replayed that mission when I ended up getting on my PS5. So I know it looks even better. But just visually and just going through that mission, it was such a fun moment in the game where it's like, this, even though I knew that scene was coming, I was like, I know what's gonna happen here. And of course there's extra scenes at kind of the beginning and end and some, little stuff here and there. But actually playing it and it just being this really cool interactive cinematic moment. Like there are parts, of course, that are like the QTE elements, but you actually do like swing around 2 different portions of the bridge as it's falling apart. And it's like, it's just an exciting moment to go through where there's all this crazy debris and all these insane things happening. And you're like, an entire bridge is falling down. And I'm just like, I'm a Spider-Man. Like that, I don't have much. Like, you need to get the Avengers on this. This ain't working for me. And it's just a cool, like, I just really love that moment in the game and just playing like through that insane story beat of just, it's like, there's a thing that happens there that isn't like the craziest thing ever, but it's meant to be. But, I was like, yeah, I kind of saw that coming. But overall, that segment in that game is such a great moment for me. And I was like, this looks really, really cool. Of course, I do want to reference Spider-Man 2. The very beginning of the game is just wild. Like them just starting off and it's like, holy crap, you fight Sandman? That's insane. And it looks crazy. And you have both the characters just swinging around, then they switch you back and forth going through buildings. And it's like, this character does this better, this character does that better. It was so good. Like just, and then it was like, the power of the PlayStation 5, and they have that scene with Miles where they like throw him all the way across the city and then he slingshots all the way back in. I was like, oh, they're putting their dick on the table with that one. And it's a great sequence. It's a fantastic moment. So I definitely love the opening for sure to Spider-Man. And to jump from Spider-Man, and I'm gonna do it because I'm gonna do it every episode, but I want to talk about Resident Evil. And I'm gonna talk Resident Evil 4, especially it's a lot easier because technically, there's missions. If you go most Resident Evil games, it's like, well, you just play through the game, and then, more recently, well, technically, I shouldn't say more recently, it's been this way for like a decade at this point, but we get chapters now and missions and stuff like that, so it's way more structured as levels these days. But for Resident Evil 4 in particular, the remake specifically, I always loved the original game. I always thought it was really good. Like a lot of people do. It's like, oh, it's amazing, and it makes everybody fall all over Leon, of course. But for the Resident Evil 4 remake, there's a great segment, and it was already fun in the original game. It was like, oh, this is cool. This is, RE4 isn't this, obviously it's not the scariest of Resident Evil games. That's when they first started to, well, I'd say Resident Evil 3 was when they first started to go towards more action, but I felt it was still way more balanced. But RE4 was like definitely hiking it up. I mean, he jumps through a window. I can tell you the first time I ever experienced Leon jumping through that window on the GameCube, my brain, chemically, I changed as a human being. Like, he jumped through a window. And I know Steve did it on Code Veronica, like he jumped through a window like the Matrix, but to do it myself, it felt a little bit like I hit the button and he jumped out a window, and I was like, dang, not since the days of Steve Burnside from Code Veronica has a man jump through a window like this. And then they just made that a mechanic. Like, you just jump through windows all the effing time. Now that I think about that, they kind of took that out of the remake. You only do it like that one time. I haven't thought of that in a long time, but there are way more windows to jump through in the first Resident Evil 4. At least I feel like there are. Or maybe I just did it a lot in that opening village. I probably did. But anyway, the segment I specifically wanted to talk about, the level itself, is actually Ashley's portion in the remake. Because one of the great things they did with the RE4 remake was give us a better balance of horror and action. And I feel like at this point, the RE4 remake is the best balance they've ever had with horror, between the horror and the action, because the game still has a lot more intense battles because of how they structure, like the AI and the enemies are a lot tougher, so they don't stagger every single time you shoot them in the face. So it makes the battles themselves a lot scarier and way more entertaining. And I love that. So, just in general, the balance of the game is, I think, a lot better. But the Ashley portion of the game is so much scarier in the remake than it is in the original. I absolutely loved it. And this is, slight mechanical spoiler for this. But in the original game, Ashley gets freed from this ridiculous trap that doesn't even make sense, so they cut that out of the game anyway. But she gets saved from this trap. And then, you save her as Leon, and then she ends up escaping. She goes into a door, and then it switches to her perspective and how she made it back to Leon, and you play as her. And as you go through the game, or in this little portion, there are still enemies there, and they're slow enemies. They don't throw stuff at you. You can crawl under tables and you pick up some lamps, and she'll just automatically throw them right at the enemies. And here's a super fun fact. I think it's only in the Japanese version of the game, if I'm not mistaken, they actually have not pre-rendered, because what am I thinking? They have the camera angles like they do in the classic games, the static camera angles, but it's only in like the Japanese version of the game or something like that. I know it's only in one version of the game. I'm pretty sure it's like the original Japanese version. They kept the specific camera angles to make it like old school Resident Evil, but in every other version of RE4, it's not like that. And it's specifically, I think, only the Japanese version on the GameCube. Every other version has like the regular camera angles, if I'm not mistaken. But in that portion, it was like, oh, it's kind of scary. You don't have really, you don't have any items. You pick up the lamps, you throw them, and that's your survival. In the remake, the lamp isn't used on the basic enemies. It's used on the special enemies in suits of armor that you have to hold out like a blue flame lamp to freeze them in place. And you have to kind of maneuver it around and make sure that they aren't coming at you as you're trying to find your way through these different segments. And I love that portion of the game. You don't have any weapons. There's no defense. You can defend yourself more in the original version. When she throws the lamps at people, she can actually defend herself. In the remake version, you can't do that. Your only defense is to make sure when they're close, you face the enemy as it's coming to kill you, and that's how you survive. And it's a great way to do horror, where you have to literally face your fears in order to survive. And I loved that entire segment of the game. I thought they did a great job with that, and it freaked me out, and it was such a good scene. So I love that portion of the game. And to keep with Resident Evil, this, to go backwards a little bit, but to Resident Evil 8, and it's not the house, like a lot of people might say. Even though that was great the first time through, I love that. I don't like puppets, so I was like, I think this puppet's gonna come to life, and it was freaking me out the whole time. None of that happens, but it's a great segment when you play through like the first time. It's really great, and it's very creepy. But the DLC, when they take you back to House Invisiblekatana, if I said that correctly, that got me, because the puppets move during that portion, and that gets me. Puppets are like my one thing, and I love that segment because it scared the crap out of me. And I have a clip for that I highly recommend you guys check out. I'll actually put that as like the little, one of the end title cards or whatever. It'll just be like that clip of me first experiencing that. But I love that portion, realizing what I realized. Well, if you watch the video, you'll know. But if you haven't played the DLC yet, I highly recommend it. Like that portion alone, I think is worth the DLC. But I also thought the DLC was actually really entertaining. It was very, very interesting. Also, if you haven't played the Village DLC, Shadows of Rose, and you are like me, where you like to just have the game by itself, like I turn the HUD off on like every game I play now, if I can. If it can go like HUDless, as long as I don't need to know like health or something like that, if I can do that, I will 100% do it. You can't do that in Resident Evil Village, specifically in the DLC. There's some stuff that happens. If you've played the game, you'll understand this. The end boss fight, you have to do some very specific things that literally do not show up if you have everything off. Like if you have like all the display off, it does not tell you. And these like literally brand new mechanics are introduced at the very end of this DLC that are a huge deal. It took me forever to beat that DLC at the end, and I also I recorded that whole thing, so you can check all this out and see my frustration and the absolute madness of being like, what the F am I supposed to do here? And then I watched someone else play it, and I was like, oh, it literally didn't tell me I could do that because I had like the tutorial stuff off. But I'm like, this is literally a new mechanic that only exists in this DLC, and you didn't think to like override the system to say, hey, you can do this. So I was a little messed up doing the end of that DLC. It was a little rough on me for a minute there, but it's just a little bit of a warning. When you get to the end of the game of that DLC, make sure you turn on the tutorial so you know what you're doing, because the game won't tell you. If you have it off, it's off the whole time, and you will have no idea that you can do something brand new. So that was a heck of an experience. That was just like a little oversight that I'm sure they didn't think about, but I was like, wow, that is not something you anticipate. But that had me going nuts. I was like, I don't understand how this keeps happening. I just don't understand it. So definitely check that out if you want to see some absolute insanity. And I beat the whole thing. Well, I almost beat the whole thing. The ending you literally can't beat, but the regular boss fight, I actually did it through sheer determination and willpower. But the literal ending, I could not do. But would have beat it like probably 15 minutes earlier had I actually known there was new stuff to do. So just wanted to randomly throw that out there. Little word of advice, just in case you play like I do without the HUD, turn it back on for the end boss fight of the Shadows of Rose DLC, just to help yourself. I promise your life will be better for it. But I'll end things there, actually. I know this was almost 100% Capcom, just it was like about 80 to 90% Capcom, which, how can you hate on that? Great times. But I'm going to end that here. I would love to know like your favorite levels in games, even least favorites if you want to do that. I don't really have any least favorites. Plus, I don't want to bother remembering things that I don't really like. If I want to go disappointing games, I will do that, and that'll probably be an episode now that I'm thinking about it. My like most disappointing games that I've actually played, I can do that as a whole episode. But as far as just favorite levels and stuff like that, just to keep it nice and lighthearted, even though I pretty much only kept it to like two developers this whole time, still good times, good levels, good experiences. I would love to know your favorite moments, missions, fights in games, all that good stuff. So please put your comments down in the comment section below, and of course, thanks for watching.